Alright everybody, welcome in. My name is Joe and today we're going to play some chess. So I'm debating on seeing if I can force that King's Indian defense. Going with what's known as the Pirc defense, which basically is a defense for when your opponent leads off with the d4 or e4. Instead of starting off with the e4, we're leading off with our king's pawn breaker. And we're going to see if we can kind of transpose into this King's Indian defense that we've been studying. Now, the goal here is pretty obvious. My opponent wants to push, take. So is there any way we can add more pressure to this square? Because push, take, take, and then I'm going to have to move this knight. Well, you know what? If we move this knight, that is okay, because we know that one of the themes is moving this knight out of the way. So I think we're going to continue on like normal. I think we're just going to continue on like normal. Should we make this d-pawn break, or should we rotate our knight? Let's go ahead and rotate our knight. Notice it is defended. It adds pressure along this square. If we could get a knight here, that'd be nice too, but more pressure. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. It's really no need to worry about that. We just go ahead and castle. And I think we're going to be okay. Now the question I have to look at real quick is, what happens if my opponent pushes down? Is my knight trapped? And indeed, it looks like it is. So let us make a hidey hole for our knight somewhere. All right, so here's part of the problem of going off script. I forgot to look at this central pawn structure. I think I need to make a break here. This particular rugrat is hurting me because that's pinned, so I can't make my f-pawn push. So, is there any way that I can convince that knight to go somewhere else? Well, we can start with this. That's an undefended piece, so my opponent would have to take care of it first off. That does mean giving up. No, I don't like that, because if my opponent trades, well, then this pawn push... Nope, that's defended. So if my opponent trades here, I'm secretly hoping he just retreats or defends, because if he trades here, then I lose the f-pawn, which was going to be my f-pawn push to attack this center. Fudge. All right. But I think that we're okay for now. I mean, obviously, where the material's even. Positionally, I'm not in love with my position right now because I'm anticipating this and my knight being trapped. Is there anything I can do at all? No, I just need to continue on. This is going to come... And we get a bit of a reprise. Okay. So now... Now our knight is no longer trapped. We could force a queen trade here. I kind of like that because that gets us off of this and gets our rooks connected. Let's go for it. Now and let's see here. Let's see if we can do anything fun. We have our 2 knights. This is available to us. This is available to us. The rook up is available to us. I like this because this is a fork. So my opponent's going to have to rotate the rook over. Ooh. So, which one do we win? Take a rook. Take a knight. Let's just take the rook. And now we're up a piece. We still have access to this pawn. Oh, my opponent resigned. Well, good game. Well played to my opponent. They just played this move too fast. That's all it boiled down to, is they saw this fork, which is a valid fork, right? But my bishop is defended. It's one of the strengths of having the fianchetto. And if I have to, I can always rotate my rook somewhere else. Yeah, it would be a shame to have to, you know, stick it underneath this double pawn. So maybe we bring it out over to here. Unfortunately, this knight would give my opponent access to here. But, you know, it's not the end of the world. I could always bring my my rook up. That might be the best thing. Keep control of this file and attack this pawn. Get my rook out. Maybe that's what I would have done. But let's do a quick analysis of this game. So this is the Pirc defense, all right? And I want to talk about the Pirc for a second. The Pirc, like we saw in this game, can completely transpose into the King's Indian, but a lot of times the King's Indian ends up transposing into the Pirc. So this is one of the names that I've seen come up in my studies. I don't know a lot about the Pirc, but it is one that I'm going to start studying, I guarantee you, because if the King's Indian is such an interesting, flexible position that we can get to, and we can get to it from the Pirc, maybe I need to look at the Pirc and see if there's any kind of strategies that develop with the Pirc. Was there something I missed? And obviously that extra pawn push with my knight out here was kind of hit or miss. So you'll see if we look at the database here, after we go to the Pirc, d4 is the most common move by a 5-to-1, and then knight f3 is the second most common move, but my opponent played the most common move. Knight f6 is the most common move from here. My opponent followed basically the main line of the Pirc. Knight c3, g6, we're still on the Pirc, but notice we've kind of transposed into that exact same structure. We just happen to have that pawn breaker ready to go. So this is technically not the King's Indian defense, right? This is not the KID. Any way you slice it, because the move order, and the move order matters because one tempo can mean the difference between winning or losing a game. The move order matters. And in this case, we are in the Pirc and not in the King's Indian. Whereas if this game had gone with this pawn, yeah, I guess we still get to the Pirc that way. King's Indian would be... No, but still transpose into the Pirc. But the move order matters. Anyway, all right, let's back up, see where our game went to. Yeah, and then this pawn attack, the Austrian attack, I want to look that up because that's interesting, because my move was probably not the best. And when we look at it, okay, bishop g7 is the correct move. My opponent advances the pawn, so I don't feel too bad. that bishop g7, the move I made, I don't feel too bad because it is the main move by far. The c6 pawn push seems a little weakening. c5, that's good. That's a counterattack. I don't mind that at all. And we've seen that before where, you know, a lot of times we'll rotate the knight around. So dislodging this pawn. I guess my opponent could take there. I don't know. I'm just throwing moves now. I don't know these move sets. All right, but bishop g7 is the most common move, and my opponent pushed. Surprisingly, the second most common move. The developing the knight is the most common. And then from here, if we look at d captures is the best way. Oh, bringing the knight backwards, right, because we can bring the knight backwards, and then maybe it can end up over here as a end up on c5 that way, or bring it backwards and it becomes its own defensive structure. Interesting. I didn't think to go backwards with the knight. Finding a backwards knight move is sometimes the most difficult, but the most powerful move on the board. It's funny to me how often you see that where a great player makes a backwards knight move and it completely opens the game up and makes it so much more dynamic. But seeing that is so hard because every other piece on the board we think about going forwards, right? Everything else we're pushing forwards, getting space. But that backwards knight move is sometimes the best move there is. And I did not see it. But capturing a knight d5, I went knight to h5, which is way down here. And if we look at the engine from this point, it's about an even board. Yeah, and then I just give white a massive advantage because I have trapped my knight. Oops. I've trapped my knight. And I have to basically give up the knight for a pawn. Yeah. Luckily, my opponent didn't see it. I still didn't see it, but at this point in time, I saw it and I realized my troubles. Oh, this is a fun developing move. It's basically pinning the knight, but it stops the pawn, which would have been fun. All right, but either way, we got out of that mess. We didn't drop the knight. That was huge. Went for an exchange in the center of the board. Yeah, and at this point in time, I saw that... oh, not here. It was after this. Once I moved this pawn out of the way, once we exchanged off these pawns, I could rotate my knight up and have it defended. But yeah, it's still a danger zone because my knight is still trapped during this whole time. And yeah, you could see that this was just not a great move. Again, by the engine, does not like this move because exactly this. One of the themes of the King's Indian we've talked about is this F pawn push to break open the lead pawn, to break open this pawn chain. And it's just, I didn't get it. Now I've got doubled pawns in the center of the board. My king is a little bit weaker. Now granted, the light square bishops are gone, so that's not too much of a concern. And then that's our advantage right there. So we go ahead and we make the exchange. Oh, I see. That would have made... No, yeah, that could have worked. I could have traded off the rook first. But in this case, I felt fine letting my opponent capture because it brought my, my rook to the open file. Yes, this fork exists, but... yeah, I could have simply grabbed this pawn, defending my... yeah, and this is really not even that much of a fork because, like I said, I can always just move my rook if I have to. But yeah, grabbing here, and then my opponent just... he had this pre-moved. I mean, you can see his clock from 9:28 to 9:32, so he got 4 seconds back. So they used a second or less on that move, and they were eyeing this fork, and good for them. Let's say I missed. Let's say I did something else. Let's say I missed this. Let's say I just did some nothing move. Oh, not that. Let's say I made a nothing move, and we traded pawns, and then my opponent made this move. All right, let me back up. Let me try something else. All right, so here, instead of that, I make this, and then he goes for the fork. It doesn't work right away because my knight can take back. But even then, can't I just go here? Big whoop, we trade. Yeah, I don't see that being too much of a concern to play it that way at all. I'd have to study that a little bit more. But over the board, this is what we ended up with. My opponent put pressure on my knight, got his last piece ready to develop, but unfortunately missed the fact that just played this move too fast. From here, wow, the engine says that grabbing this pawn is still the best move. That's so funny to me. Really? That's the best move? Why not say move the rook out somewhere, anywhere? Oh, because we're dropping this, right. At the end of the day, we're dropping that, and we can't defend both. Yeah, this is a fork we can't defend. Right. This fork. Either you're giving up the rook no matter what, if you bring the rook back. So either giving the rook or the bishop. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm up a full piece at that point in time. And nothing's trapped, so I can still get my stuff back into the game. And realistically, I could have taken back with the king. There's nothing pressuring me, so there's no issues there. Ah, my knight is trapped. So I would have to give some material back. Okay, alright. I'm still up a few pawns there. Right, 3 pawns to 6 pawns, so might be able to convert that end game, but this would be a bit of a challenge. And this bishop is trapped. Look at that. Looking to have an attack here. Yeah, I guess we give it to him. Yeah, I guess we just give him that pawn. Yeah, we just keep converting. Okay, all right, that's whatever it is. All right, guys. But yeah, so we played the Pirc. I don't know the Pirc, so I can't talk about the Pirc yet. I'm going to study it because I like this structure. I like this structure of fee and cutaway the dark square bishop and sticking the knight up there. I like that, and I like the fact that we've studied some of these themes on what to do. Now, obviously, I don't know. Obviously, looking back on this, I will very much need to be aware that my opponent can easily trap this knight, so I will be looking for backwards knight moves more, because this was not the way to go. Yeah, and let's go back. We'll have to study this a little bit, but if we look at this, what did my opponent play? Played e5, right, and then capturing or knight... Yeah, capturing or knight f7. Or knight d7, excuse me. Yeah, capturing or knight d7 are the way to go. So I'll have to remember that. So if we see the 3 pawns pushed, this knight might have to come backwards. So maybe that's something we need to keep in mind. And you know what? That supports what we talked about in that video, that if this gets too closed down, we might need to rotate to the queen side and use our pawns on the queen side a little bit. And I could have followed that a little bit here. Yeah, bring this knight back, support the queen pawn, the c pawn. That might have been a good idea. All right, so that's a lesson we can learn and we can take to our next game. All right, guys, I enjoyed this very much. I hope you did too, and we'll try another game soon. Thanks.